welcome to FaceHammer episode 92. It's me, Russ the Face. I'm joined by the Mr. B Dizzle, my shizzle, Rogue Idolness himself.
I should have brought them with me.
You could have
made them come on for
done
side
like
screen.
glove puppets with your Rogue Idols.
They're so huge. Honestly,
That's what she said.
transporting into a game is just like it's like a really weird thing where you just end up with like mine aren't on their bases yet, so I just turn up with like I don't know 700 grams of bubble wrapped model in a blob. Like they're just so weird. Nothing else feels like
that. It just looks like you're holding pebbles, so you could just walk around the street holding them. Just one in each hand. Like, what? I have got it.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
It's like a pebble.
It is like a big pebble. So in this show, we are going to talk about how to write lists that make you better at Age of Sigmar, and how to think about the environment you're going into when you write army lists. I'm going to go through my thought process on Slaves to Darkness list that I've been writing because Carl and Dave have kindly given me a Slaves to Darkness box to keep me get me started. So I will be doing my Slaves to Darkness army, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And you've been playing with rocks, as we've just revealed.
Yeah, I've been playing with one rocks, although I have 2 rocks painted, and I own 3 rocks. So that could be a thing. We'll talk about that list, but it's not a good list. It's a fun list.
It would allow me to make a thumbnail, which is 3 rocks from the fun, and then like superimpose the faces of the actors and actresses that were in that TV show from a long time ago that show my age on your Rogue Idols. But we'll get there. And then at the end we'll wrap up and we'll talk a little bit about generic tips for players who want to write a list but don't want to just follow the meta of internet lists, which is its own little weird world, or put stuff on forums where they get told that don't play that, it's rubbish, go away and play the list that everyone else is talking about. So we're going to do a little bit on that. I figured that'd be useful for people. But I think before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who got involved with FaceHammer Worldwide.
It's awesome. Thank you to the guests. Thank you to people who joined in and commented in. Like, it was the level of engagement was great, and we had fun doing it, even if we did get pretty sleepy. And I think we learned a lot in a short amount of time for some stuff that's definitely going to be super useful in the future.
Yeah, so I played around with some streaming software that I've not used before, which I'm now recording this on instead of the other software I was using. Hopefully the audio should be a better quality. And we did some Twitch streaming. Those videos are available only for a couple of days, so they probably won't be there once you look at this. But what we are doing is putting everything on YouTube. So I had some audio issues on the Twitch stream, which I've been able to sort out using my old faithful Audacity with my podcast editing. But it's a lot of faff for me. But and then Les has been sort of maestroing those together. So yeah, we will be releasing those videos periodically. They're a little bit slow to go out because we've got quite a lot of post-production to tidy them up, but yeah, they'll be coming out on our YouTube channel, so check those out if you haven't already. Obviously the painting competition went down really well, and we had some really good entrants, so that they're all available to see those. Oh yeah, and you got your super duper Dan. My man's not finished yet. He's still in progress.
But he's going to look so good. And you've got an excuse to use him in an army as well. So
he's going to be in my... So I converted mine. So it's like got the staff off of the Zinch Demon Burning Chariot. It's got the chest from the Chaos Acolyte from 40k with this shoulder pad. And then I've got a book that's also from that guy. I had to cut the arms off and do some green stuff work. And then I've got the head from the guy on the Karkadrak, which is... I don't know if I can get that in focus, probably not. But
you can, just about. Yeah.
Just about. So that's the head that I went with. And he's got a little plinth with skulls on it. So I will finish him, but unfortunately I have to go and earn money and do paint things for other people. So he's been on hold. But I didn't realise how much... how draining and how kind of engaged I'd have to be to keep the stream running and that, and it was quite hard to focus on doing anything other than the interviews and getting the tech ready. But I think for those people that might have dropped in and out between the shows, like between the interviews, there was a lot of like just hang out and general chat and dead time, and that was kind of intentional. It was kind of like a bit of a hangout. So if people were watching it on the Discord, they would see like a lot more kind of raw what it's like to hang out with us on, which I don't know if it's a good thing, but you know, they're still here. They didn't leave, so well, some people did, but you know, that's fine. But I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who got involved, whether that was just dropping in, giving us well wishes, or big thank you to all the guests as well. And obviously that was an amazing response for us to get those people to give up their time to come on and
so good
talk Warhammer, and really looking forward to those videos going out. And we've put Richie and James Tinsdale and Oscar Lars will go up today as we're recording this, which should be out before this goes out, obviously. So the other thing I think we should probably talk about is that we've got a pre-order for an exciting product, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We've got some gaming objective markers that we've been working on. Super useful, really good way to not forget objectives in games, which shouldn't be as easy as it is, but it is, and it just keeps things very, very clear. So you know what's going on, your opponent knows what's going on, and we've got them in a lovely little, pretty resilient travel case as well, and they're nice and clear without being kind of too in the way. And also what we've done, which I think is really nice, kind of, there's a very weird middle ground with this type of stuff, because you don't want to interrupt how the table looks and feels, but at the same time you want something that's really, really obvious. So we picked blue for the rings, which kind of fits with our colours, but I think is a nice colour to pick. But also we've got 2 sets of rings, so whether you're playing with 6 objectives, 8 objectives, 3 inches away, 6 inches away, you can put the least amount of stuff on the table possible for whatever you're doing, which I'm a real fan of. They're also non-slip, which is very, very useful, actually.
Yeah, that would be the biggest thing, is that they've got that non-slip coating on the side, so you don't have to worry about them skitting around too much. And I think the good thing as well, like you say, is the less... The other rings out where you've got like multiple rings in one template, is they're easy to get confused. Because if you're playing a mission that's a 3-inch and you've got a 6-inch template with a 3-inch middle ring, you might move a unit, forget, and go, oh, actually the template is almost hindering your gaming experience. And
you want the least amount of stuff possible, and what's there you want to be the only stuff that is relevant. We're doing them for clarity. And I think that really helps with that.
And I think as well, it will speed games up a little bit, because you don't have to worry about being super precise about measuring every model as you use them.
Is he out? Well, obviously he's in, or he's out. Yeah.
So
I really like them.
We wanted to make something. So they're on pre-order from Element Games. I've put I've got a little video on it, so I'll flash that up in a minute. Which just shows you what they're about. And if you could order those, that would really help us, because that helps us.
Check out the dice as well.
Juice content.
We've got plenty of pretty things.
Yeah, the dice are really nice, actually. So lots of dice and colours to choose from. So obviously, when gaming starts to get back to normal at some point, hopefully you'll have these cool things. I think the templates will ship in October.
Yeah,
so towards the end of October,
from when this episode goes out, I imagine.
So get your orders in. We've only got limited supply, so we probably have enough for the next month or so, depending on how orders go. But if you want to not miss out, then definitely make sure you pre-order. So that's all the sales stuff done. But I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break there, and then come back and we'll get into the main topic of the show, which will be start off with me talking about my Slaves to Darkness army list.
FACEHAMMER objective markers are available for pre-order now. Click the link in the description below and order them from Element Games.
We are back from the break, so I think we can start off and talk straight about about the Rogue Idol. No, so we can no. Yeah. So we'll talk about this Slaves to Darkness army list that I've been going down this journey. So I'll just give context it a little bit. So I started off, and I really want to lean into the aesthetic of Chaos Warriors, that kind of Conan the Barbarian, when they come in that village and they just kill everyone, and they can hear the lamentation of their women and all that. They crush their enemies. That kind of, like, those Chaos Warriors, those really iconic sort of killers from the north that invade, and
you want them armored as well, don't you? You don't want marauders. You want
I don't mind a
blokes
few
in armor,
but I don't want like old derpy He-Man looking marauders. I really like the Warcry models.
Lovely.
The Untamed Beasts especially. I mean, hopefully helpful that they're actually really good. But yeah, so I have got some lesser warriors in my army, but they're kind of in my head in the background. They're like the marauders, although they're not, but they're like the marauders. And because you've got the dog in there as well, the doggo, that's kind of like the Chaos Warhounds, so it kind of feels a little bit like themed to what I'm doing. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. But I kind of wanted to go down that route. Now, what I basically did is I was fortunate enough to be able to get a game against Ossiarch Bone Reapers with a draft list against Carl, who came round, and we had a socially distanced garden game of Warhammer, which is my first game since March. So it was very good to shake the cobwebs off. Although weirdly, I could find nothing. I didn't know where any of my dice were, my tape measures, my dice tray. I was just like, I was a complete mess. It was all just hidden behind stuff, and even my table was behind like piles of boxes because I've been shipping stuff, so I've had all this stuff in boxes. But anyway, so I think it's probably a good idea to get into the army list itself that I've settled on. I have changed it since my game, and I'll talk about that. But let me just put it up on the screen. But I'm just going to adjust our cameras slightly so I can fit us and the window of fun. There we go. That's working. Look at that. Beautiful. So Byron has no idea because he can't see this, so he's going, what are you talking about? Yeah. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this army list. So I wanted to lean into the aesthetic of warriors. I also want to be as competitive as I can be with this army. But aesthetically, I want it to look cool. I want to enjoy painting it. And there's some choices in here that revolve around that. And I want to talk about why I've made these decisions and what I'm doing. So starts off Slaves to Darkness allegiance. So I had the choice of doing different allegiances, but I thought let's keep it simple, stick to slaves, get my core of slave stuff, and then later on if I want to delve into Zinch or Nurgle or something else, I can paint other men and just play around. So this is my starting point. So who knows where the journey will end? It might end with me collecting order, but who knows? So
This is a slim.
Well, I'm tempted with Deepkin. But Deepkin, they're like evil. They're like chaos elves. I like them.
They're brilliant, yeah.
And they got fish. Who doesn't like fish? Well,
turtles.
Lots of people, but yeah. Turtles. Yeah. Sharks and turtles. This look great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got rocks, I've got turtles. What could go wrong?
Okay.
So the list that I've written is a despoiders list. Now, the reason I went for despoiders is I just simply think it's the best. I think the magic one's a bit quirky. I think the one with recycling units could be quite good, but because I wanted to lean into what I call the power of the book, which is the Khorne Demon Prince and command points are really important. So getting an artifact gives you D3 at the start of the game. But you get that regardless. It's not your hero phase. I think it's the start of the first battle round. So you get those command points even if the guy dies straight away. You still get them. So and you get them if your opponent goes first. You've got them in their turn to use.
That's good. That's
like
a big difference, right?
Yeah, it's like it's such a good ability. So I did play around with formations. I looked at some of the stuff like Plague Touched. I looked at Mark of Nurgle, which I know is very popular on the Slaves to Darkness forums, and Jim uses that a lot, and I'm in the Facebook group and I see a lot of people talk about Nurgle and Plague Touch Warband. I know that the Allegiance of Slaanesh is quite popular with Laureate Host and things like that, but that's more a Slaanesh army than a Slaves to Darkness army. So I decided not to run a formation, mainly because I found the formation very restrictive and very expensive. Formations are 180 points pretty much across the board. And what you get with
so many wounds.
It's a whole unit of something. So
and you're not getting your. I presume they don't get your drops low enough for it to be like it's not like 4 or less.
You can, but easily. I just don't think you care. Like, and I'll explain that in a minute, especially with despoiders.
We'll touch on that with my list too.
So,
because I'm very
I think when you talk about drops, what you'll really want to the reason you want low drop is you want to dictate the game to give you a double turn, and you want to be able to spread out to avoid being alpha striked. Now, if you've got a pre-game move and your army doesn't give a shit about being double turned, then you don't need it, right? You just don't need it. So what I've done is I've basically gone, I do not need to worry about having a low drop army, because the least I could get it down to probably like 3 or 4, and that's not really low enough to actually warrant me taking sacrifice of paying points and taking units I don't want to take, but also
exactly,
like the plague touch and things like that, you need like 8 units of slaves to darkness mortals with the right mark. So you actually find that you end up running minimum size units of like a spawn and a 5 knights. You can't have a 10 of knights. You can't have 15 warriors. You've got to run like 3 units of 5, because you've got to get the units high enough to get the formation. And the formation's good, especially plague touch, because you do mortals when they hit you. But it kind of dictates my army, and I'm all about combat. I love combat, and Khorne makes your combat better. So I've lent into Khorne, because I see a lot of Nurgle armies that have got a Khorne Demon Prince for Bloodslit Ground, which we'll talk about. But so I went with despoilers, and that makes my Demon Prince General have a 5-up ignore save. It means he can heal. I can make terrain block line of sight, so that's a bit of shooting mitigation. Yeah, exactly. And with despoilers, you get the command trait. I think it's Paragon of Ruin. I might have picked the wrong one, but it means you're allowed to move D3 units 5 inches before the game. Now, that actually combos with the Untamed Beasts, because the Untamed Beasts also get a pre-game move of 6 inches. So if you combo that up, you can move them 11 inches. So
that's great. That's so flexible.
So you can just push them out, and you can contest objectives around the middle of the table with 9 bodies, but also, so it doesn't mean they can auto-capture by putting minimal stuff forward. And also it means that if you're playing people that have got stuff that they want to get into early, or they want to deep strike, or, like Kradron, you can get the depth so you don't get shot with your key pieces early on. And it gives you a turn then to get your buffs up and then go. So the alpha strike's less of a thing. Now that does mean they're probably going to give you the first turn, but then you've got these units in the middle of the board capture the objectives, and you can even threaten objectives on their side of the table because they're so far ahead. So I think that's really good. So pre-game move, can't really complain about that. I think that's super solid. So he's Khorne, and that gives you the ability to do Bloodstick Ground. So let me just pull up the Warscroll for you guys. Hopefully I get the right one. Oh, look at that.
This is a headliner, isn't it, kind of the list? This is a big part of it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I like the Demon Prince anyway, because they're fast, they've got a good save. They always strike first in combat. They're not wizards, which is a bit of a shame, but, that's fine. But you've obviously got the Bloodstick Ground, so it's a command ability. And then everything within 18 enemy units, their run and charge rolls are halved. So it gives you this bubble where even if you're like 5 inches away, suddenly you need a 10 to charge.
Deal.
It's massive, because what it does is it just shuts down the enemy's ability to bring a lot of combat power to you if they double you. Because it's up, and it's just always up, and it's really strong. So it's like well, you can't get into him. So if you fail that charge, that unit does nothing. It's better than debuffing the unit. They just don't actually do anything. Now, I've comboed that with obviously the auto include that is Be'lakor. Now, he's so good. Obviously we've talked about him on the other show, but the Dark Master. You can, before the game starts, you pick a unit. Even if Be'lakor dies, you can still use that. And on a 5-up, they need to roll 5-up if they want to do anything. So particularly against a combat unit, again, mitigates the double. Mitigates that because it lasts until your hero phase. So I like to go. If they make me go first, I'll go. It's their go. I activate Dark Master. If they win the double turn, do they want to take a double? But you've normally got the counter charge set up, so if they give you the turn, you can go in and welly them. If they take the turn, then Be'lakor's got double value, and you've still got Bloodstick Ground Up because you pop that in the first turn.
So what are you threatening with it? Is it a 10 blocker knights? What are your key ways that you are going to scare someone about that prospect?
Well, it's the knights is the thing in my list. So I did change my list, and it's purely there's two reasons. One, I don't want to paint 25 Chaos Knights.
Solid.
Two, I know it's better. I know it's better. But also aesthetically, I kind of like Varangard, so I want to paint some Varangard. So I have put
awesome.
In the list I played against Carl. I had 10 knights, so 10 knights were, and I didn't have the sigil, but the sigil and the Varangard are more like they're okay, but they're more there for like looking cool and giving me something cool to paint. So yeah, the Varangard and the So in my list, the Varangard and the Chaos Knight units are the counter charge, the Chaos Warriors are the Anvil. But actually, when I played,
everything's kind of both, especially the knights. They've got a lot of wounds.
Well, they're defensive because the whole army's got 4-up or 3-up armor saves. They've got 5-up ignore mortal saves, or they've got the Varangard have got a 3-up armor save. You can put Oracular Visions on for the Sorcerer. That gives you a reroll saves. Then you've got Demonic Power that you could cast on another unit, and if you get that off, that's reroll hit, wound, and save. So
for one, or just
until your next hero phase. So it's reroll everything basically. So you can basically Demonic Power, and the Chaos Warriors get to reroll armor saves anyway because they've got more than 10 in the unit. So you've got
everything's duplicated across your army. You've got you've almost got a duplication of Be'lakor's ability with the Demon Prince.
Yeah.
You've got a duplication of reroll saves on something that's already resilient.
Yeah.
Everything has a 5-up after save-ish.
Against mortals, yeah.
Against mortals.
But the Varangard don't have that, but they have an ignore spells, so it's kind of the same.
Yeah, so you've got all these blocks that are different, but kind of you could swap and change your. It just sounds like you've got a lot of dudes, all of which do somewhat similar things. I've run death armies like that in the past, where you make sure that your after save is a 5+, and then everything causes -1 to hit or something, and you've pretty much got the same stuff going on all over the board. It's quite powerful.
Yeah, and it just does what it does well, and I've just lent into it. And so the Chaos Sorcerer's Marker's Inch means he rerolls 1s on his saves as well, so he's got a little bit of a reroll of a save.
Yeah, why not?
You can turn off terrain with your. I forgot the name of the ability now, but it turns it into I think it's like Nightmare Chasm and something else. But you make a terrain pitch black and Nightmare Chasm. I think those are the two rules, and basically it means that it blocks line of sight, and enemy units that are near it can take mortal wounds.
So restrictions on that, is that like 1 within 24, or do you just pick one?
At the end of your movement phase within 6 of a Demon Prince, I think it is.
Okay, and they're pretty nippy, so it's not that difficult.
Yeah, movement 12 for fly, so you can get pretty fast. And actually what you'll find is because the Demon Prince fights first, and they're quite because being Khorne, the aura ability from my characters is +1 to hit, reroll 1s to hit and +1 to wound if it's a general. And because you're into spoilers, that's an 18-inch bubble. So all my stuff that's wholly within 18 in my Demon Prince is +1 to wound and reroll 1s to hit. So
again, it's doubling down on consistency, because that's a big, but like from his base, that's huge. More than half the table as far as the bit that matters. Yeah, it's
like 37 inches, well, about 38 inches. But the cool thing as well is that I've got the Sorcerer Lord I've talked about. He's got the mantle. It doesn't really matter who has that. That's just the only artifact I've got. So the good thing about this guy, which is the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, he's actually pretty tanky. He's got a 3-up armor save, and he's also got his 5-up mortal wounds save. And if he kills anything with his axe, he heals D3 wounds. Now,
that really mounts up.
Does a load of damage. Like when he charges, he can do mortal wounds to everything within 1 inch. If you charge multiple things, they all take it on a 2-up. He also has the command ability Knights of Chaos, which allows you to take knights, chariots of gore beasts, and gives them +1 to hit and reroll charges, so it makes the knights better. That's why the 10 knights is probably better than the Vanguard and the Sigil, because you just get to buff that unit of 10 knights, which is 30 wounds with a 4-up armor save, rerollable if you've put oracular visions on them, or if you get demonic power, even better. And then they're +1 to wounds, they're wounded on 2s, but they're also +1 to hit because you've put Knights of Chaos on, so they're 2s and 2s, rerolling 1s to hit. So rend 1. So it's just loads of dice goes through. But I mean, I decided to take Vanguard, and the reason I put these in, one, they're cool models, right? So why not?
Yeah.
But what I like about these guys is they have the rule where they can fight multiple times in a phase.
Oh, that's cool. They took that out of the Bonesplitterz book for the Boar Riders, and I'm really upset about it because I think it's pretty unique.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, I haven't. This might change in the future, so like, I'm thinking that I'm probably better off giving them Warp Steel, Demon Forged Blades. So that's if you roll a 6 to hit, they do a mortal. They're freeze and freeze, 1 rend, D3 damage. Now the other thing you could do is you could take Fell Spears, which you've a freeze and 4s to wound, rend 1, damage 2, but on the charge you get +1 to wound, and the rend goes up by 1. So because you're Khorne, if you're in range of the general, you'd be freeze and then 2s with the spears, rend 2, damage 2 on the charge with 3 attacks with a 2-inch reach. So I'm tempted to run Fell Spears. I need to play games and see what works, because they're my counter unit.
Yeah, and having like your entire army is kind of everything's pretty flexible, can do similar stuff, and you are playing in a way where you don't care about your opponent getting the priority roll or getting the double. It feels like you're planning for like a 1 in 5 situation with the spears, and then you're planning for anything / the grind with the blades.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the blades do mortals on a 6 to hit,
that never is bad.
That's like better than in addition. It's like it's just free extra damage.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And you think damage potential that the Demon Forged Blade with 3 attacks, the maximum it can do is 12 wounds, because you could get 3 6s to hit. I mean, it's a bit unlikely. 3 6s to hit and do 3 damage on each one that's gone through is 12's the maximum damage, whereas the Fell Spear 6 is the maximum regardless. Because you're 2 damage a shot. So if you get all 3 attacks through, 6 is your max. So I think the Demon Forged Blades are better. That's what I've put in my list to start with.
Especially if you're attacking twice, that lets you kill, like, I don't know, if someone's got Fulminators or something like that.
That's per model.
Yeah.
So if you've got 3 of them, because they come as a unit of 3, that's 15 wounds or a 3-up save. And if you put Demonic Power on them, they're rerolling everything. But they're going to be hitting on like 2. I can't give them Knights of Chaos, so it'll be 3s to hit, 2s to wound, rend 1.
Is Demonic Power re-roll, or is it re-roll failed?
Reroll.
Okay, so you can fish for 6s if you're against something indestructible. That's really useful as well.
Yeah, so it's super, super good. Yeah, so I mean, I think they're really cool, and you also get to do that charge, so you can go in and fight, then as another activation, activate them again. Now, what I've done is I've taken the spell on Be'lakor as his backup spell, Fight Last. So what that means, I can put the Vanguard in and go twice before they hit me, if I get the spell off. So I've got the teleport spell on the Sorcerer, and to be honest, like, I don't think you need it. Like, it really doesn't add any value to the army. You might teleport.
Nice threat.
Yeah, but the problem is you're out of mark range, so you're not getting those benefits. You're out of range to get oracular visioned or demonic powered. You have no bonuses to charge of them +1. So I did it against Carl. I put a unit of 5 knights on a flank, opposite 10 more tech. Didn't make the charge. He charged me. I had lancers on the knights, which I'll talk about why I've not got lancers anymore. I've got 1 unit of lancers, and that's purely just for having that extra rend on the charge with one of the counter units, but the other 2 got ensorcelled. I just think they're better. Like, I just think it's better to grind. So yeah, basically, it's very simple. It's just 15 warriors as an anvil, mark a Khorne, so they can benefit from the buffs from the general. three units of 5 Chaos Knights. One's got Lancers, 2 have got Ensorcelled. The Lance one, if you imagine you'd set up like a checkerboard, so your Anvil will be in the middle. You have 5 Knights on either side, which you've got the Ensorcelled. The Varangard, if you imagine like a W, the 2 bottom points would be Varangard and Lance Knights, and then characters sort of spread around that. And then your front of that will be the 2 units of Untamed Beasts in a line. Pretty much doesn't matter what they've got, doesn't matter what they're going to do. That's how you're going to deploy it every time. You don't, and that I really like that in my old Warriors army. It was very similar. It was Knights, Warrior, Shrine, deployed exactly the same way every game. And I'll just put it on the table in formation and go, right, I'm done. I'll go to the bar. You can carry on deploying. You get the choice.
It's nice to have that chill out before you start your game. Knowing, like, I remember various people talking about this years ago on podcasts and stuff like that, but having a bit where you just get to switch off your brain and go like, whew, take a breath, like go to the bar, like go to the toilet, just have a chat, whatever it is, and then be like, right, game on, let's go. I think that's really powerful, especially if your opponent doesn't get that. You've got it down there, like, well, how do I deal with where am I gonna go, where's this demon prince? And you're just like, well, I'm done.
It's basically confident, it's impactful, and it's less things you have to think about.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
you might adjust it in some situations, depending on the scenario, but you don't want to worry too much. But basically, essentially, it's a very sort of, you want to play a little bit compact. It kind of plays a bit like Death, where you want to play around your heroes. That's why I think I kind of like it. So yeah, the Knights Lances now is a bit of a weird one here because your ensorcelled weapons, you get 3 attacks, freeze, run 1 damage. It's very solid. The Lance, you get extra reach. You get 2 attacks, so it's 1 less attack, 4s to hit, which is not anywhere near as good. Obviously, you could boost that with Knights of Chaos, and Khorne gets 3 or 1s. Freeze to wound, but no rend, 1 damage. But on the charge, they get quite a good bonus where they get +1 damage, and their rend goes up by 2. So damage 2, rend 2. So on the charge, they're quite nasty. But, like you said, how often do you get to charge? If they don't charge, they're pretty crap. Whereas the Ensorcelled are just good all the time.
I mean, my argument would be, and I've had this with Gore Grunters a lot, after quite a lot of obsessive thought going into it, I think if you run 6, you take anything that's got more reach, because every now and again you're not going to get that back rank of people in. You get a charge that's slightly less than you want, and a pile-in still can't get you there. At least they have some attacks, which is a lot better than none. Regardless of whether they had swords or whatever, like if they can or can't get in as a result of that choice, then you pick the right one. And then the smaller units, which would be 3s with Gore Grunters, I think they are there more for the grind. So that's the way that I would be approaching it. If I had a 10 and 2 5s, it'd be the 10 would have Lances and the 5s would have.
The weird thing with the Chaos Knights, they're kind of opposite. So, like, because you've got a big 10, it's harder to get the impactful charge because they're easier to tag or to bog down. Whereas a 5 is a lot easier to get into places, like small spaces. Yep. And also, like, it's a lot less impact if they charge you, if it's only 5 Knights, than if it's 10, if it's your big 10. Whereas the big 10 is so survivable, it's going to grind. Every game it will end up grinding, so you might as well give them Ensorcelled.
People gooed up on that centre, and then you just plough in with work.
And for me, if I have a 10, it's Ensorcelled. If it's a 5 and it's a Dart, it's got Lances, so it's the opposite thinking. Which is quite an interesting concept. I mean, I might be wrong, but that's...
equally, so, like, so may I. Like, thinking about it, like, they go in there. Your army isn't about doing so much damage into your opponent's force in the first turn that they're hitting you back with less. It's about getting there and then staying there, probably for 5 turns, and still having 4 Knights left at the end of turn 5, no matter what they've chucked into you, I guess.
Yeah, and they're just one of those units that is so hard to break down. 10 Knights has got 30 wounds. I mean, that's the change. And I'll talk about why I put the Varangard in. I talked about the double pile in, the little Dart. And it's about having more damage in a smaller space. Which
more reliable damage as well.
Yeah.
Right? Not swingy, but I'm here. My save is a 4+. I ignore mortals on a 5+. Everything only gets better. If I do these spells, I get more reliable. And I hit on 3s and wound on 3s and do this.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with your Varangard. They've got a 3-up armor save, so they're a little bit more tanky than the Knights, but you've got half the wounds. So, like, there's 280 points for the Varangard, or it's 320 for 10 Knights. Now, the reason the Varangard appealed to me is it allows me to put in the Doom Sigil, which I'll talk about in a sec, but I just talked about the Untamed Beast. I mentioned about the pre-game move, and what they're there for is they're a screen that just pushes up, contests the middle, and stops you. So it's using this this ability, which is, you know, and actually what's really good about these guys, and it's kind of one of those things that people don't necessarily realise, is they've got a shoot attack and they can run and charge. So if they do give you the first turn, they're not very good in combat, but you can gum up their army because you can put them
if
in.
They've screened, you can be fighting their screen.
Yeah.
You going first, and their 10 people is now 5 people or whatever.
And what I've decided to do in my list is put this Doom Sigil in. Now, the reason I put this in is because I don't really want to teleport a unit on the first turn. I'm going to cast Demonic Power. That's every game always going to go as my sorcerer spell. He's got Mask of Darkness, but I'll probably never cast it. Bellacor's got 2 spells. So obviously one of them is his Enfeeble, which is an enemy debuff. There's nothing in range on the first turn. He's got the Fight Last spell, nothing in range. Gives him something to cast. He can put a Mystic Shield down on a Knight unit, and then he can do the 8-fold Doom Sigil. Now, the Doom Sigil is quite an interesting thing because you basically put down this Chaos Star, and it's within 12 of the caster. Then what happens is you keep track of the number of models that are slain within 12, and at the end of the turn, you roll a dice. On a free up, the player who's got that turn must pick a Slaves to Dart unit, hold it within 18, and add 1 to its attacks. So what you do is you run the Untamed Beast forward, drop the Doom Sigil behind them, and because it has to be wholly within 18, you can keep your Sorcerer and stuff out of range, but then put in like the Knight Countercharge Knights and Vanguard wholly within 18 of the Doom Sigil, and say, well, the only units you can pick are those. So there you go, they kill your Untamed Beasts, you roll a load of dice, and you go, well, free up, okay, so you probably, if they kill out 2 units of Untamed Beasts, your whole army's going to be buffed anyway. And you say, well, you know, you're going to give them extra attacks. So then if they give you the turn, your counter charge is going to be much more impactful.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I really like this, and I think you just plonk this in the middle of the table. The whole game, you're going to be going, well, which units of mine do you want to buff? Which units of mine do you want to buff?
You can also push it much further forwards than that, because you can move your Demon Prince 5 inches before the game starts, right? If you want it to be right in your opponent's zone, you've got the width of the base and 12 inches and 5 inches.
Yeah, but you almost
so actually that could be.
You almost plonk it, and you want it sort of central on the table, but central of your territory.
Oh, yeah.
So you kind of don't want it on the halfway line. You kind of want it back a bit, because you want it to cover the Untamed Beasts, so they're in range of 12 to die. But you also want it so it's wholly within 18 will capture your army.
Yeah.
And then you do that, and it's like, well, it's you're going to buff mine behind units anyway. And it's just annoying. It's an annoying thing that people want to get rid of, and I quite like the
aggressive
model.
Defensive.
Yeah, and like I thought about putting in a Blood Secretor. And the Blood Secretor is cool, but the problem is you have to reroll successful casts. So you don't you want Demonic Power off, and I know people out there might be going, you've got a Khorne army with Wizard in it, but you want to get Demonic Power off. If you don't get Demonic Power off, it's kind of you don't really want to successfully cast it and have to re-roll it and fail it, because it's such a big spell. So even like Mask of Darkness or making them fight last, you don't want anything messing around with your magic.
No, your army's about reliable control. Basically, you're making the most of not crazy, sexy, funky. This does 1 million damage units. You want You've tried to do everything you can to make everything as level and as reliable and as consistent, and dropping him in is just the opposite to everything you've spoken about.
Yeah, so it's a very simple army that's got a few tricks in it, but it does everything quite well.
Yeah, I think it's underestimatable. That's probably the biggest thing I'd say from an opponent's perspective. Oh, he's got some average units, some average units, some average units. So he's got Be'lakor. Everyone's got Be'lakor. Try and kill Be'lakor, and then you're like, sweet, here's a load of knights.
Yeah, you're like, you could have killed Be'lakor. It doesn't make any difference because he's done his job by being on the list. So, I did write a list which had more Demon Princes. So the Karkadrak the interesting choice here is dropping the Karkadrak, putting in another Sorcerer Lord and a Chaos Lord. Now, the reason a Chaos Lord's interesting is because he has an ability to make a unit pile in an attack again.
So you could get 3 from one unit.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's some equity there. If you buff the hell out of something,
And and having 2 sorcerers means you've got obviously another spell, so you've got a backup of something. You've also got the ability to do 2 oracular visions, so you can oracular vision 2 units. So and you've got that. So the Karkadrak is kind of a heart choice because I like the model.
He's cool.
Yeah, and he is good. But I'm thinking, if I was going pure competitive, I'd just take a Chaos Lord and another Sorcerer, and that gives me 10 points spare, which could be something or nothing. Doesn't matter.
Like a Triumph is badass on this army. Like all of those things are good. You get reroll saves, great. That can be on some outlier on a flank who can't be reached. Reroll hits, cool. Reroll, like all of it is solid. You could. I mean, if you're making something fight 3 times in a phase, then hits or wounds would be savage because you could pretty much hit with everything, wound with everything, and do that 3 times.
Yeah, so the list would basically look like something like this. So you've got your it's almost the same. It's 10 points less. It's then got an extra character in it. You've lost that kind of fighty, tanky, mortal wound character, but at the same time, the only thing that you do miss is the Knights of Chaos ability. So I think in this list it's probably better because you don't have a lot of knights. You've only got like 3 units of 5 knights. Yeah. If you were running the list with the 10 knights, you'd probably want to keep the Karkadrak for the Knights of Chaos to get the +1 to hit. But because
he's a nice babysitter as well, isn't he? He's like a Kavalos with the Death Riders.
Yeah, and he also procs the Khorne. I mean, the Chaos Lord would anyway, but he procs the Khorne ability. But so there's some play in the list, and if you were going, I think with the Varangard, the Chaos Lord's probably better. So it's interesting, but I think from a visual point of view, I would prefer to have the Karkadrak because you've kind of got the Varangard, the Karkadrak, the Sorcerer. You've got a bit of everything. And I think the other list might be better, but it's not so much better that makes me want to not play with this one. Because I don't think it makes much difference, because it'll be situational. But because the Chaos Lord would be cool if you get that double pile in, but it still costs you a command point. And it's like, is that better than having +1 to hit? Well, obviously. But if the reroll charge means your knights actually get into combat, then that's probably better. I don't know, you can spend a command point to reroll charges, but it's 6 1 half dozen the other, really. But but I'm going to collect the army. That's going to be my starting point, and I'm going to paint it in my old black scheme, and I'm going to do those, I'm going to change the robe colour to a nice crimsony purple that I mixed Baratnar Burgundy and Inky by Darkness together, then mixed Screamer Pink into it. It's got a really nice colour. And I want to paint the Doom Sigil because I think the model looks amazing. And I think on the table it'll look good, and I think I'll be able to win games with it. And by doing Khorne, and why I don't really like the Nurgle armies is you're relying on your opponent to hit you in combat to do your damage. Whereas what you're doing in this is I'm going, well, I want to be better at combat. I want to be more reliable. I want to have rerolls. I want to have bonuses to wound, which is massive. I mean, getting bonus to wound. You're suddenly like old Hammer. You're hitting on 3s, wounded on 2s. It just feels good that you're back in 8th edition. So
no one ever.
No. Yeah, but I think the list itself, that's what it does. So yeah,
sweet. I like it. I'm keen to play against it, which will happen at some point soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a little thing coming up, so I might proxy it so you get a chance to... I don't know if I can get it built in time, because there's quite a lot of stuff I need to build.
You can take my Rogue Idol off and I'll cry. That'd be
great. Yeah, well, there's a good segue onto crying and Rogue Idols, so I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break, and then we can come back and we can talk all about the Rogue Idol list you've been writing, Byron. Boop,
yeah.
Boop, boop. And we are back from the break. Nice little quick breaks for you, Byron. So I know you're not used to this live recording we're doing now.
No, it's grand. It's all good. I'm surrounded by homework, so
yeah,
fine.
You're just there going, "Oh, I've got this stuff to do."
Oh no, I've just got like 13 lists, some on a tablet, some printed off with notes, and then a model or two close by. Yeah.
So do you want to talk us through? I mean, which list do you want to start with?
I mean, let's start with the Cunning Rock one, which is the kind of the one with 17 different characters and most in it, and then we'll get less and less varied and more honed, but probably less competitive, I think, as we go on. So basically, this list is essentially the exact list that I took to Blood and Glory a year ago, and the reason I took this list is that I just wanted to run something different that made me have to play my tits off in order to do well. Because I think the Bonesplitterz is all of the Auric War clans, apart from Big War, is I think one of the best written books that has ever come in Age of Sigmar, period. I know it's quite a big claim to make, but the internal balance is huge. If I look at the Savage Orcs, the Bonesplitterz section, like everything pretty much you could, like, oh, obviously I'll take this, obviously I'll take that. The entire, like, it's wide open, and that makes it a really fun army to collect, I think. And none of it is so obviously the right thing that over something else. That means that the points are probably about right, and also the abilities are kind of like pitched at a fairly even level. So you can do a little bit of shooting, but that's not going to be their thing massively. You can do combat in various ways. The only thing that you can't get particularly, apart from said chunky bloke, which is a real issue, is durability. But it is not a thing in the book. Like, you can get high damage, you can get high move, you can get a bit of shooting, you can double down on your shooting, you can buff your shooting. You cannot have a resilient unit, and the fact that the only access to resilient unit is this overpointed bad boy here means that even if you have given him a 2-up rerollable save and you send him into someone, he's going to attract 100% of the attention from your opponent because they can touch any one of your other units and it is probably going to die. Now, you do have a couple of ways to make things more reliable. You've got a +1 to save spell, you've got a +1 to save dance. They don't happen on automatically. The dance is on a 3+, and you have to be within range. And the spell, you've got to get a spell off, and you're not particularly good. It's not like a magic-focused book. The spell lore is brilliant. That's another amazing thing about the book. All of them are viable and have uses. You've got an ASL spell. You've got buff your armor save. You've got +1 to hit, charge, and run in the same spell, which is brilliant. You've got a mortal wound breath weapon thing. You've got loads of stuff, but you cannot really get bonuses. Rogue Idol does give you +1 to cast within 6 inches, and you can take some other items, but if you go into one of the, whatever they're called, the special clans, you lose some flexibility with the items you take on your general and stuff like that, and command abilities. I'll run down this list first, though. So this one uses Cunning Rock, which is expensive. We've touched previously on points of battalions and stuff like that, and spending 140 points is quite a lot. Now, what that gives you is the ability to have a move or a shoot in the hero phase with a unit of Arrow Boys. You can do some other stuff with the normal Aurochs, but in this, it's about the Arrow Boys.
Yeah.
They only hit on a 5+. They've got 3 shots each if you've got 15 or more. So that is quite a lot of shots, but they're pretty crap. They don't have rend unless you're shooting a monster, and being in range is quite difficult. I'll run through the list, then I'll talk about some of the army special rules, because there are some things you can do to get things in range. So there's a Savage Big Boss. He is pretty crap. He's there because of the formation. Maniac Weird Knob, who is the caster on a boar. He's got one very important thing in that once a game you can re-roll a failed spell attempt. So he's just a bit more reliable than other stuff. Generally speaking, I'd probably put the move on him. I used to put the combat buff on him, but I think the move, the new way that the book is, the move is the most important thing that's there. I've got a couple of War Docs. They can dance to give you +1 to save, D3 wounds healed, or +1 to cast. They can do that on themselves or someone else. It's pretty useful. And then there is the Wargod Prophet, who is the general. He gets 2 spells. He has -1 to be hit in combat, 7 wounds, a 5+ save, and on a 4+ get a command point every hero phase. He's a real kind of utility hub of the army, and I'm very glad that he's a bit more resilient because everything in this book is squishy, as I've already touched on. 20 arrow boys, 20 arrow boys, 10 savage orcs. They're all in the Cunning Rock formation. And then kind of the two most fun parts of this army for me, the Rogue Idol first, who is just a real beat stick. He's got movement 10, he's got 2d6 damage attacks, which are 3s and 3s rend 2, 10 2 damage attacks that are 3s and 3s rend 2, so he's fairly consistent. He gets to reroll 1s when he charges, which is actually very relevant, because if he's attacking, you want that stuff to get through. It's important within the army. And then the stabbers are absolute glass cannons in every sense of the word. Like they
super scary
stuff.
Though.
Yeah, they touch stuff and it dies, and then they die, and then on a 4+ they do some wounds when they die, when they throw their big spears away. So the things that I'm trying to kind of leverage with this are, number one, it's just a well-rounded list. Like nothing about this is particularly extreme. It participates in every phase of the game. It's got quite a lot of casts, even if they're not very reliable. And I haven't sacrificed for that. Like I don't think you're in a brilliant place in the game to put, unless you're like Kairos or someone super reliable, I don't think it's a particularly good idea in general to be stacking up multiple wizards who've got incidental spells in Warhammer at the moment. But the Prophet is kind of, he's got a bit more reliability with his item choices, and he's my general, and he's a bit more survivable. The War Docs, they've got their dances, which make me feel okay, and they're quite cheap. And the Weird Knob, he's ironically the one I dropped just after I said he's the most reliable caster. I think he's the one that I'd be dropping out if I was dropping anyone. Army-wide rules for Bonesplitterz: half your units get a 5-inch pre-game move. I think that's called Savage Hunters or something like that. That combines with if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be taking Cunning Rock ever. Like it's just not worth it without. But that means that you can do your normal move of 5 inches plus a pre-game move of 5 inches, and then get in range of something with your little crappy bows that was 28 inches away, even if it's just shooting once. And then other times, like 15-inch on deployment games, stuff like that, or if you use the double move spell, it means that you might have options to reach out further or indeed shoot something twice. And even if that first shot is just at a screen, it's still, you've got to be getting equity somewhere from your 140 points. It lowers the drops, but you have to take a savage boss, and I think that's a tax. So the pre-game move is a big part of that. The pre-game move, generally speaking, unlocks quite a lot for the army. If it wasn't for it, I don't think it could compete, actually. So things it unlocks that people might not be aware of. Number one, making your first move effectively 15 inches with a Rogue Idol. That's solid. You could have doubled his move as well. So you could be going 25 inches and then a charge with flies. It's brilliant. It's amazing. And the moment he's gone away from your army, the next turn he gets dramatically worse, because you probably lost 1 or 2 points of armor save and re-rolling ones if you put Mystic Shield on him, because you do have quite a lot of spells. So if you're rocketing him off, that's generally what you do, but he does get way worse the next turn. That's worth remembering. The other stuff that the move unlocks is the War God Prophet has one of the breath weapon spells. Now, it does a mortal wound to everything in a unit. It's range 24 on a 6+. If you get a 10, that's modifiable. So with bonuses, it does the mortal wound on a 4+. This army, apart from the shooting with the bows, which is crap, doesn't really have ways to do a massive amount of damage at range or in combat to stuff like a large amount of crap damage. Unless you've rocketed 30 Savage Orcs into something, it doesn't have a huge amount of access to that. So that's really useful. So if you start the game and your opponent's got 40 skeletons, you could conceivably breath them, half that 40 die from that attack, and then you send a Rogue Idol in and you sweep them up. And you need the ability for that in the army. So the pre-game move, it's lovely to be able to get a Vortex in as well. Since points have changed, I can't do that, but I would really love to do that. You get 5-inch moves, that's a 29-inch threat range on the spell, and if you've got the Vortex, it's a 35-inch threat range. And getting +1 to cast from a Vortex, +1 from being close to Rogue Idol, and +1 from doing a dance. You only need to get 7 on your dice to be doing that. So it's a really nice option, and it's quite difficult for people to play around as well. They don't expect you to use your pre-game move to like take your weak.
I was about to say, do you find that when you play people, you get a lot of like your opponent deploys and then they just go, oh shit, you've just like, I just didn't see that combo and I've just lost this piece, or
more often than not you don't get the spell on the bonus, but like it's you can stack things in your favor a little bit to be like a 50% chance of doing that, and that is a scary spell. That might pull out a scroll or something like that, and you can't get bonuses super reliably, but being at +3 to cast potentially makes it quite difficult for people to dispel
So
that.
do you use Cogs then for re-rollable casts then, rather than movement?
A lot, yeah. So Cogs is a bit of a... it's interesting. I debated taking it out, but the main reasons that Cogs are there is because big stabbers have run and charge, it's a Warscroll ability, and you can double their move and run and charge them, and that means that you can threaten to have the Rogue Idol and the big stabbers in turn 1 on people. That is quite a lot of fairly reliable damage and fairly reliable resilience in someone's face with the Rogue Idols. My war clan is Drakfoot, which ignores ethereal abilities and after saves, so you're quite reliable with that. But if you're Bone Grins, where people can't run away from you,
I was about to say, like, shoving an idol and being Bone Grins is probably quite horrible for people.
Yeah. He's got a 5-up armor save. He's got a 4-up save naturally, which is worse than it used to be. But you can get +2 to his save, and you can get reroll 1s from Mystic Shield. So he's a really tasty option for that reason. There are some other things you can do to kind of force reliability into the list using the pre-game move and casting. But you would need Vortex. So there's an ASL spell, but it's range 18. I've been trying to work out how to get this more reliably, and that if you played a completely different type of list just by changing from Cogs to Vortex, you could take something that was a lot less assertive, but probably more reliable and technical. If you double the move on a Rogue Idol, send him in, pin someone there, they've got to charge him, and then you make another unit ASL and like get 30 boys close to it or something like that, and then they charge you and they're still ASL. That's an interesting one. I've not played around that yet, but kind of
an ASL is always strikes last, if people weren't aware.
Thank you very much. So kind of my learning points from the list so far is that it can compete way more than I thought it could, but it is entirely and completely unforgiving. Like really, really is. Like you are constantly sitting on a command
point. But that
point.
kind of makes you a better player, right?
Oh, it does. I picked this to make me a better player. Like ironically, the Bonesplitterz made me a worse player over ETC because I was playing a list.
Yeah, it was a very different book though, wasn't it? So
yeah, it was. I was playing a list that was like
it was just alpha strike. Doesn't matter what they put on the table, and then scramble.
Exactly. Like like execute in the right way, and then try and do a lot with a large amount of very weak bodies.
It's a bit what Richie was talking about with Sylvaneth. It was like he had this whole planned phase, and irrelevant what the other person had. He put the wood down, put a laurel in, put the thing, did the exploding wood, the bubble, teleported around, and then it's like, now put the Frost Phoenix into your army, then you're like, now it's your go. And it's like, it doesn't matter what they've got, it's the same pre-plan, and the choices might be what you put the Phoenix in, like what you shoot, or how you shoot, but essentially it's the same thing, and what you're doing is you're taking out the room for error, because you've already pre-planned and practiced that stage. So it's quite interesting.
The problem with lists like that is when one of your things that is meant to happen very reliably doesn't happen, things start crumbling.
Did you start going,
Yeah, I remember a few squeaky games where I didn't get off my +1 to hit spell, and I was like, well, I can't spell my command points because they're way less than half as useful. And I just end up like putting a screen in front and hoping that I won the priority roll, when I would then try it again, running my wizards backwards so that my opponent won't be able to reach into spell, stuff like that. This is completely different, but it's definly way worse.
It's a bit like that Lumineth list that we talked about, that tournament winning list that we did a video on. That it kind of is a bit like that. It just shoots and does its thing.
Exactly.
So I think it's nice to have that flexibility.
It is, and I've picked a book that I think is slightly behind the curve in terms of power to force me to up my game. I was either going to pick this or literally like Beastmen or something like that. And large deciding factors. I also missed playing with a fully painted army that I could add units to fairly fast. That's a big consideration for this. So I've played this list for a couple of games. I played Seraphon, I've played Big War, Iron Jaws, and I've played against Undead with Chain Ghasts and Wizards and strange stuff and a Mortis Engine. But it's a good list, and it was being handled by Luke, so it was very, very well played.
Yeah.
It had more game against all of them than I thought it would, but the Iron Jaws were really, really difficult. I got to leverage the fact that I ignored after saves and ethereal ability when I played against the undead, which is very good. And then also the lizardman I played had goat trick in, and I ignored his 3-up after save. So I killed him with 4 big stabbers, even though he was reducing the damage. You've got the ability to war in it, which can be really scary, but my big consideration at the moment is whether Cunning Rock is worth it at all, and whether shooting is worth it, period, in this book, because it is crap. I've just said how bad it is. Why am I taking a formation that...
Do you think it's worth just leaning into having more bodies and having more big stabbers?
Yeah, and that's more fun.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so I really do think it is. Another thing you could lean into, I won't moan about them being overpriced too much, but the Rogue Idols is you can, especially if you want Bone Grins and you had 2 Rogue Idols, I think there is a list there that is more technical than it would appear. So I've written a new version of this, which is it's Coprux. I'm using a formation again that after I moaned about them all being expensive. Again, this is 140 points. I just think this list is so... the Rogue Idols aren't glass cannons, but your bodies that you score and win the game with are glass cannons. So I think having the choice of who goes first or not is really important. So roughly speaking, in the formation, you would have 3 Warlocks and 3 units of 10 Savage Orc Morboys. They're the guys who've got loads of attacks. I've then blobbed in 30 Savage Orcs because I need some bodies somewhere. And you've got 2 Rogue Idols, Cogs, and Coprock. And the idea with this in Bone Grins entirely and explicitly is that you would do these things in this order and then Scrabble. So it's kind of like the list we spoke about. But
and the War Dogs are casters, right?
Yeah, they're all casters. Right. They're not like you've got some. I haven't chosen items on them, but Bone Grins restricts you a little bit. You do have a formation though, so anything that gives you a bonus to cast or reliability with casting is what you should be taking on these guys for every reason imaginable. The idea with this is you will cast Cogs. You make sure that that wizard has the bonuses and is out of range. You'll cast Cogs. You'll use it for the move, and your Rogue Idols. Then they've moved 5 inches before the game starts. Even if you don't get the double move spell, they move 10 inches, which is 12. And then they charge at +2 to charge, maybe +3 if you buff one of them. You get into your opponent's face, and then your opponent cannot run away from you because that's what Bone Grins do. They have to charge you if they have the option, and they cannot flee from you. They can run around you, but then they can only stand in the right place if they run. They don't get to go and fight your really very, very weak Morboys. And the 30 Savage Orcs, I don't know whether you give them spears or not. I think you probably would. That unit is there to be another recipient of the +1 to save dance and the +1 to save spell, which you would definitely have on one of your wizards.
So you're effectively tar pitting their army, forcing them to charge stuff that is tough and resilient, and then just outscoring.
In theory, yeah. But there are major problems, like if the objectives you want to score are on your opponent's side of the board, I don't know what you do.
Not much you can do about it, yeah.
No, I really don't know what you do, and if you could actually take 6 big stabbers and use them in the same way, and then
it's a lot of points in formation and Cogs. It's a lot. It's 220. It's like I sort of write lists. I just want more bodies on the table. I want more things.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it's got a decent amount of wounds considering how many points are spelled there. It's got 167 wounds in it.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because all of those 10, 10, 10, 30, that is 20, 20, 20, 60 as far as wounds are. And the Rogue Idols have got 14 or 16 each.
16.
Yeah, so it's got more wounds than you'd typically have.
I think as well, though, like you said, they're squishy, so it's like they've got a lot of wounds, but they're not like resilient wounds.
No, and one of the lovely things about this list is that if you want them to survive, you have to run your War Ducks up the table after them and then dance to heal.
But boogieing behind the rocks.
Exactly. Yeah. One person boogieing to give him a save, one person boogieing to get his wounds back. But the thing is that it is devastating to see one of those guys get 2 or 3 wounds back. That's really very painful for someone to see. Also, that list comes out at 1960. I don't know how many points Emerald Lifeswarm is, but you never see it, so I presume it's not that high.
I think it's like 30, so it's quite cheap.
Yes, so you could squeeze that in there and then have a couple of options for healing. You can't rely on the magic in this list, but I think that one's interesting and is not strong, but definitely would confuse people, and they wouldn't realize how weird it was to play against until they were playing against it, and they had 2 piles of rocks in front of their face that were pinning half their army. If someone screamed, though, you'd be you'd be devastated. You'd have to do some slightly weirder stuff. So that's kind of the middle ground list, and then there is the
silly
full
one.
Yeah, I mean, if we weren't silly enough already, here is how to spend 1,260 points on rocks. 2 War Docs, 3 units of 10 Savage Orc Mora Boys, 3 Rogue Idols, Coprock, and Cogs. So that is a 4-drop list rather than a 5-drop list. It doesn't have the 30 block, and instead you have another Rogue Idol. This one, you would be mad if you went in Bone Grins, because that is all you have to win games with this army, is stopping people from being able to run away from those 3 piles of rocks. But that is a massive amount of frontage. These bases, I don't know, they're probably like 6 inches wide.
They're on the night base, aren't they? Like the big, big wide oval.
Just getting to run up, and
they're massive.
It's huge. Just getting to run up and cover that much of your opponent's board. I'm going to measure this now.
So even if you leave a 6-inch gap between them, no one can go between them, can they? Because they can't. So
no, and that, I mean, if they go between them, they then have to charge one of them as well.
You said it's what, 6.5?
Yeah.
So it's what, 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. So what's that, like 30 inches? Wall?
Yeah, plus 1.5. It's half the board.
So it's like 31
pretty much.
inches. Like
pretty much like holding people in. So it's a bad list. I don't want anyone to think this is a good list whatsoever. You have 30.
This isn't going to make you a better player, is it, Byron?
With the 6-up save. No, but you have a great time. You probably drink a lot of beer. But that one is kind of, if I go to an event and I want to have a silly time and convert another one of these, I've got a normal one, I've got the gorilla that I made. I might convert another one to be like this or something like that. That would be a fantastic one to run. Yeah, and I think if you played Bone Grins with a rounded list, you could then drop to this and be playing this at a technical level that other people wouldn't see, like in terms of where you left your gaps, what you did with your guys. Maybe you don't need Cogs in it because you got 2 guys that might make the charge, and that would open up a room for other spells. But
put another War Doc in.
Yeah, you get Inspire other character for that. Yeah. So that's basically where I've kind of gone with it. I do think the one with 2 Rogue Idols has more game than people would think. It's 5 drops, 2 Rogue Idols, formation, 30 Savage Rocks, 4 drops. Yeah, actually, they're both 4 drops. So both of them are fairly low. Cogs is debatable in both. I do think Emerald Lifeswarm actually would be nice. Although 30 Savage Orcs or a Rogue Idol, any triumph you could get on those units is fantastic. That's one nice thing about underpointing these lists. Like if you send a Rogue Idol in with reroll saves when he's at +2 to save against someone's Rend 2 unit, it's unbelievably good. Getting reroll to wound on him when he's 3s to wound is just outstanding. If you dropped Cogs, you could be Renegade and ally in a War Chancer as well. +1 damage on the Rogue Idols is a really good option, and he's a resilient hero. So
my Iron Jaws army that had a Rogue Idol in, I allied in a War Doc.
Because swapping
it. Yeah, it was similar, and I wanted the Rogue Idol to give the bonus to cast for the teleport, which was why I had it.
It's a really nice way to do it, and because he's not an ally, you've got room for it. I also rewrote the original list and played around, and basically I ended up dropping out the big boss, who's 90 points, and the Cunning Rock, so getting 230 points, and dropping the Arab Boys to normal Savage Orcs, and you can get a list which has 30 Savage Orcs, 10 Savage Orcs, and then if you are Bonesplitterz Allegiance, which you are, you can put in the Boars as battle line. And I think the Boars are a really, really interesting option because their vanilla speed is just faster than any of the other Orc things in the book. They get +2 to their charge like every Orc unit with a Musician does, and they've got 3 wounds each. They're quite fast. Their attacks aren't bad, and if you war them, they are ridiculous. In terms of like a massive quantity of average quality attacks, it is unbelievable the output from one of those guys. you could take the guys they've got 4 attacks because they've got no shields. If you really want to like bone down on this, and you end up with 4 attacks per boar and 6 attacks per dude, I think you can get it to 7 attacks per dude as well. So you can send in each one model has 11 attacks, which could be 3s to hit, 4s to wound, I think, or something like that. I can grab the book and check, but that's really interesting because there isn't a screen in the game that can survive that charge.
No, I know the boars are. I think the thing about like Savage Aurochs, they don't really appeal to me, and I think they just seem to be a little bit lackluster from the damage output, and the survivability is not really there.
Yeah.
So I always lean towards the Iron Jaws just for further models.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you're sort of still trying to like look at more the Bonesplitterz side than like the Big War or the Iron Jaws.
I mean, the main reason is actually ironically that they're not as good. I think you can become a good player with anything from this book. Like, please avoid Big War. It'll make you a worse player. You can use that once you've earned it, but that's not going to make you good at Warhammer.
Well, I think Big War is technical to a point, but
I think it's managing a tally. It's like running Epidemus or something like that. But you could get way more learning and then be like, cool, it's an event. I'm Big Warring after a couple of games, and you get slightly more reliable casting. Like, I'm not saying like it's great. It's really good, but I think you should definitely try out the other less tempting stuff because it is less tempting.
I think there's something to be said for trying out less used units anyway, and then if you're playing War Clans and you've got a Big War and you've got a bit of everything, you might as well try and run pure Bonesplitterz, try and run pure Iron Jaws.
Exactly.
To find out the nuances of those units and what difference they make. So, you know, like the buffs you get in one over the other.
Command abilities.
And where you...
-1 to hit from Iron Sun, stuff like that. It's some real equity in all of them.
It's all about understanding the tools that are available to you. So this is the problem with swapping armies a lot. That you don't have that depth of experience where you might do some math, you might better do some test rolling, but you haven't got 50, 60 games worth of experience to draw on.
No.
Where you know, oh, I've been in this place before, or I know what happens here roughly, because I've done this a few times. So I personally think that there's something to be said for perseverance and patience with your army, and trying to play stuff that isn't necessarily the best thing in the meta, because that's probably going to get affected by the updates, which means you can't play that anymore.
Exactly.
And then you'll just feel like, oh, the army's got worse, so I'm going to move on. But actually what you probably should do is, if it's an army that you were playing not because it was powerful but because you wanted to play it, is try to go, how do I make this competitive with the changes? And where
you'll be there when the dust settles, like very well experienced with a variety of units. And if suddenly you need to be able to kill screens better because, I don't know, like Daughters of Cain make a resurgent and there's just 10 witch elves everywhere or something, then you like, and they for some reason got a 5-up rerolling save. You've then got a unit of, you're like hardest unit in Warhammer.
They're wearing bikinis, tankier than an Urglin.
They're sparkly. It makes you blind. You can't hit them. But then you can run out your savage orc boar boy maniacs. Like, no one's ever said those words because no one apart from Ian Spinks run them. And Ian Spinks managed to go 4-1 consistently again and again and again and again, using an army that no one had seen and units that no one had seen because he tried them and he understood them. But the stats on that unit, they got 4 attacks each, 4s and 3s, and if there's 5 or more models in the unit, they add 1 to their attacks. They've got 5 attacks, 4s and 3s, no rend, 1 damage. And the ball's got 2 attacks, which are 3s and 3s on the charge. So you could send 5 guys in, having ward, and be just doing just so much damage. It's unbelievable. Like 7 attacks without a war, and then 9 or 11 attacks depending on how your war goes. And they could be +1 to hit. That is enough to wipe out any screen there. And it's just 5 guys. And then they've only got a 6-up save, but they've got 15 wounds too. So and we spoke about small footprints. Those 5 guys, they can be like 3.5, 4 inches wide with all of that damage going into the flank of a unit. They are movement 12. I got their move wrong. I didn't realize how incredibly fast they are. That is
You used to go on those, right? So,
yeah, release the flying 24-inch +1 to charge, +1 to hit baby dudes, but you could also run them in a 10. And that is that's really interesting. And the idea with that, I think, particularly if you do have a Rogue Idol, and it's why he's such a regular feature in so many of the lists, is that he is fast, he can get there without help, and when he gets there, he can be resilient. So generally speaking, it's really important to know how many of your units are in combat, or you've got the ASL, the Always Strike Last spell off somewhere else like that, because you want to be going first with this unit because it's your turn. Then this unit doesn't care about the thing they're in combat with because that thing is Always Strike Last, and the Rogue Idol doesn't care because he's a Rogue Idol. If you get that type of stuff wrong with this army, you just lose a unit for free. And that's a big part of me picking it, is I wanted something that punished me to that degree. Like both the games that I've played, or the 3 games that I've played recently, every single one of them I've used the big stabbers wrong somehow, and they've still been great, but they could have been really great. So I killed Gotrek, and then had them half an inch out of place so they couldn't, when they died, throw their D3 mortal wounds in the right direction. I had them half an inch out of place for my war when I played against the big war list, which means that I had 6 less attacks, and I could have wiped out some Gore Grunters rather than killing 1 3/4 of them than them killing me back. And all of these things really add up. So I'm going to try out some different forms of the list. I want to try out 30 Savage Orcs. I think that's a good option, and in combat you can get them to a 3+ save if you dance and you do a spell at them, and 60 wounds with a 3+ save is just 60 wounds with a 3+ save.
Yeah.
You've got to have a character close to them for immune to battle shock using that command ability, because they just, even with that, their bravery is bad. They're going to get punished. And then the other thing I'd like to try is perhaps just screwing off trying to be low drops altogether and having like 3 units of 2 big stabbers just for the flexibility. I think that sounds sexy, but it might be completely impossible to use because they're so fragile. But them standing behind 10 guys, or them running up and being in a little bubble of boar boys and just standing there in the middle, that's quite unique. Like 3-inch reach with a lot of damage fairly reliably is pretty solid. And them doing stuff when they die is just, it's a bit of a bonus.
Well, it's like they deal with them and they get hurt, so it's pretty good. I was thinking about Slaves list and whether taking like Spell Portal and taking like the Strike Last and things like that would be good, because it would allow you, if they gave you the first turn, you could then like make them go last. If they charge you, they go in after you hit them anyway and stuff like that. But I just think the Magic's too unreliable unless you go Kabbalist, and then the list is really completely different, and then you could lean into that as well. That's why I think that's the good thing about, I mean, I know you've been talking about the War Clans book, but the Slaves book, and so Vince said it's almost like 5 books in one, because you've got all the 4 different Chaos Gods and Slaves, so there's so many options. I just don't think
once you've got a core, you could customize forever. It's like free cities, but not stupid.
Yeah, and it appeals to me, and I think that it's not the most powerful thing, and I'm not going to be naive enough to know that Be'lakor won't get affected by a points change or an update, because. But I mean, end of the day, it's like he's a useful tool. And I think the problem is he is a standout, so I imagine he might be adjusted, but I'd hope that some of the other stuff might get adjusted down, or there's some choices. Like, I still think the Karkadrak's too expensive for what he is.
The Vanguard,
he's 230. The Vanguard probably need to come down as well.
Every monstrous cavalry in the game,
it
suffers from that Mournfang syndrome.
I mean, you look at the points cost of those, and I think that there's, I hopefully it'll come out in the wash, But, that's all good. So I think we could probably take a break, come back and talk generically about writing lists with your favourite faction to be competitive.
Yeah.
And better at Warhammer. So we're back in a sec. And we are back from the break. On the short 30-second breaks, Byron. Sorry. So just want to talk a bit about some general principles about writing a list that's going to make you better at Age of Sigmar. and a list that you might use a non-meta book, or writing a list which can be effective in a book yourself rather than copying someone else. I think it's important to realise that this is part of the hobby, and what will make you a better player is doing this work yourself.
Also caring, for sure. If something is your baby and you wrote it yourself, you will care about it and you will want to do better of it as well. And I think that's the first thing that we need to touch on, because it is so easy to underestimate how much of a factor wanting to do well for your boys is on the table. And that was undoubtedly when I was doing really, really well with my weird Phoenix list. I'd taken something that I genuinely didn't think was that good. People hadn't realized, including me, how good it was. But I really wanted to be like, oh my god, you're running Dragon Princes? I want to make these work. I want to make my dragon work. I want to make my birds work. I want to make my 10 spearmen work. I felt like my back was against the wall. Little did I realize it wasn't. But I really wanted them to do well, and for me to do well with them, and for me to learn with them. And I think that is a huge part of, if you've crafted something yourself, it's just different from the first step, right?
Yeah, I think you go through a couple bits of this process. So one is discovery. So you might come up with a concept or an idea, and then you go, right, how do I apply that from my faction? I want to use X model, X Warscroll. Then read the Warscroll. What's it do? What else complements it? What synergizes with it? And I think the point is that process is really important for you to understand what everything does. So make sure you maximize the opportunity in the game. You know all the buffs, you know all the rules. The problem when you copy someone else's list, even if it suits you and it suits your play style, that's another topic, you haven't done that work. So you're going to forget rules. I didn't
start by understanding its components.
Yeah, I mean, I did it when I took the Beastclaw Raider list that Tom ran. I just copied his list. I was being lazy. I did read through the book, but when I played the tournament, I know I made mistakes. I forgot things because it's not something that I crafted myself, and it's not something that I'd read the rules, thought about, then created. I copied. Now, again, it suits my play style, and I read all the rules, and I've got a pretty good memory, and I like it, but I didn't do enough of that research crafting.
Didn't do your homework
to make it. Yeah, I didn't do my groundwork. I just relied on someone else's groundwork, and what you do as well, you miss opportunities to improve on something because
100%.
You're assuming it's the best because it did well, but the other list variant hasn't been played because nobody's done it, so you don't know. And it's like what you said about your list is, I think, discovery of playing games and understanding. Don't play one game and go, oh, that lost, that was rubbish. You need to analyse why or what was problematic for you. Then
try
think
and fix
about
it, return with the same list.
Well, is it a problem? Was it just unlucky? Could it gone the other way? Is it a weakness that you have to accept? So no army in Age of Sigmar is going to be the best at everything and not have any problems and have good matches across the board. If it does, it ain't going to last very long. So I'd say for starters is you will have a list, it will have weaknesses. So take my Slaves army, for example. It's not very good against shooting. If someone can get rid of the heroes, it struggles. It's very strong against people who want to use mortal wounds or fight you. It's not good against rend. So if you've got a lot of rend, not a lot of mortal wounds, it'll struggle because the rerollable armor save and I don't get my 5 up. So that's what's going to hurt me. If you've got a way to kill the Demon Prince or the Sorcerer, that'll break my army down. So it's got weaknesses, but the point is I understand what they are and I can play around them. And that's the point.
Do you think it's important? We're talking about lists for people to get better at the game. Do you think it's important to try and participate in everything? So magic, combat, shooting, movement. I mean, some armies just don't do that, right? No. How do you handle this? You're not shooting. You're Slaves to Darkness. You're not bothered about shooting.
No, I think you can forget one phase quite and go fine. I mean, it's always the trope that Warhammer's always been about fighting. Eventually, every game's going to come down to fighting. So I think, for me, magic and fighting has to be in an army or shooting and fighting. I don't like armies that don't fight. That's why I struggle with KO. KO don't fight. I don't really like that. I don't really like armies that don't go in scrap. So there are armies out there that don't rely on fighting, the combat phase.
I stood loads of resilient people here or tag you.
I don't think that'll make you good at Warhammer, because you need to understand that phase of the game. It's very important. I think you don't have to have shooting, but I think if you've got shooting, target priority is a thing, and that's something that you have to learn.
You can treat your magic as your shooting as well. If it's magic missiles, they're kind of interchangeable.
But what you charge and what you fight is target priority anyway. It's just how to deliver that damage. I think if I was like, first point of what I would say to people is, obviously you've got to set your own objectives when you collect an army, what you want to do. And I'd say always pick an army you like the models, you like the background, you like the aesthetic of them. If it was me
as well,
and I was a new person, I would be trying to find an army that has has lots of units to pick from, has lots of options. So I would say something like Stormcast are very good. Perfect. You've got lots of units, you've got combat, you've got shooting, you've got magic, you've got a bit of everything. You might not like Stormcast, so don't collect Stormcast. But you could go Lumineth for a good example. They've got a lot of different things in there. They're a little bit more specialised, a bit more honed. I think War Clans are a good book. They don't have really shooting, but they've still got a good mix of units, and they've got some interesting stuff in there. I think they're a little bit more technical than people probably think they are. But I think it's like most books are good.
Ogres, Khorne, I would add to that list too. Gloomspite list gets I would perhaps avoid because the amount of models on the table. Obviously, if you really love them, then absolutely take it. But I think it's quite a lot to manage in a Gloomspite list.
If you take Gloomspite, there are lists in there that aren't just lots of bodies.
Trolls.
I think that they're one of those books that I think is in a little bit of a bad spot at the moment. I'd say Nighthaunt's probably similar as well.
Agreed.
It doesn't mean
they're so fast to paint and so cool.
You can't play them. It's just that understand that where they're sitting. And the point is, if your objective is to learn the game, right, winning or losing doesn't matter. Understanding why you won or lost, and was it down to decisions that you could have done better, and improving is important. So I think the frustrating bit is when you get into a situation where you're like, okay, so this game, I didn't have an option. I can't think of something I can do. And equally, if you're playing in an environment like a tournament environment, I talk about that because that's my kind of wheelhouse. I mean, you might play at a club or your friends around your garage. It's the same thing. That's your environment. If you know that everyone's playing Bone Reapers, then you're like, well, there's 3 Bone Reaper players. And I'm like, actually, this army really struggles with Bone Reapers. You're going to have a tough time. But what you've got to understand is that if you're in a club environment or game environment, you could also say to your friends, like, hey, don't take that. It's a bit silly. It's a bit one-sided. Can we kind of tone it down a little bit? Can you try some different things out? Or you could just accept that and just say, well, I know that, but I need to think in my head that if I go to an event, I might not play Bone Reapers. So I can't just design a list to beat Bone Reapers because that's not going to help me anyway.
Yeah, thinking about it's really important, though. You've made a good point there, because if you can beat Bone Reapers, they play somewhat similarly to a couple of other armies. Fire Slayers, my block does a lot of stuff, that type of army. And if you do bash your head against that wall enough times and think about it, whether you win or you lose, or it's close or it's not close, and you make small adaptations that aren't, my list is here to beat Bone Reapers, it could deal with it if it happens. Then when you come to the event, someone might rock up with Bone Reapers, think that like this is an easy game, and you're like, I have played Bone Reapers 700 times. Here is my like left field renegade tactics of I don't know. I start and my units are like in the back corners of the board, and you can't do anything for 2 turns, and then I win on something else.
Yeah, I think when you write a list, I think it's important to understand what you're good at. So if you know, so my Slaves army is good at disrupting combat, and it's good at surviving in combat. It's good at grinding. So the choice of Lancers or in Sword, I should be thinking I'm going to be grinding, so I should go in Sword. It's kind of obvious. Like if my list is more about alpha striking or counter charging or doing something like that, then Lancers become more appealing. So these kind of little decisions will become easier when you know what your game plan is, what your generic approach is. So for me, the Warriors is all I just went, how many re-rollable armor saves can I get in my army, and how many ways have I got to disrupt my opponent charging me or doing stuff. So Be'lakor, Bloodstick Ground, lots of re-rollable saves. Now, that wasn't necessarily because that was what I wanted to do and I went and found that book was the best at it. It's because I looked at Warrior Warscroll and the Knight Warscroll and the Warriors reroll armor saves. And I thought, well, actually, they've got a mortal wound save, so if I can re-roll the saves on those guys, and I wanted to be good in combat, Khorne fit. If I've got a Khorne Demon Prince, I get Bloodstick Ground. I looked at despoiders, I get command points. So you just can't look at stuff and start making choices to lean into your strength. Now, the flip side of that is understand what your weakness is. So, I'm weak.
Do you combat it or do you just accept it?
Yeah. Do you mitigate it? Do you double up? So if you know your order is pivotal around one model, take two. Just take two of the same thing. Because they have to kill two then, not one.
I have to have access to this command ability on this 100-point dude.
Yeah. So take two of them.
I can't make him resilient. Or I can give him one of them a 5+.
Or take three of him.
One. Yeah.
It's like... It's not, unless it's not a special character. I mean, you're like, well, I tell you what, for me, my weakness is I've got one Chaos Sorcerer. So in my head, I'm thinking I should have two, really. So it'll probably happen down the road if shooting becomes very prevalent or I keep losing the Sorcerer. I'll just have to take two. I used to take two Blood Secretors. Like, they didn't stack. I took two anyway because you can't kill two and two. It's a lot harder than killing one. So understand your weaknesses, understand your strengths. That would allow you to assess the table. Like when you're at a table and you could see what they're bringing, it also helps with target priority, because if you know what you're weak against, you know they're a priority. If you can remove them at range or with a spell or mitigate them with an ability, or you know that you need to get a certain buff on or off to deal with them, that becomes your priority. You're going, well, that's what I need to do. So that makes the decision process easy. What do I screen? What do I use Enfeeble on? What do I use Be'lakor's ability on to his Dark Master? It's the thing that I'm going to struggle with. So when I played Carl, I did it on the Stalker unit. I used 6 Stalkers because they can go up to like Ren 3. I don't really want Ren 3 going into my 4 rerollable armor save because that means my armor save does nothing. Yeah. Then I don't get a after save because they're not mortal wounds. So that unit would have just rinsed my unit of knights. So I shut them down. And then I got to dictate the combat on them, which allowed me to kill them before they could be effective. So I think that's really important, is to understand what your army does well, what it does badly. And when you look at your opponent's army, knowing what it does. And even if you don't know what any of it does, if you know you struggled at stuff that can deploy 9 away and charge, or stuff that's particularly got a lot of rend, just say to your opponent, does anything do mortal wounds in combat? Like, if you don't know what the stuff does, you don't need to memorise all the War Scrolls. Just say...
You can ask throughout the game as well.
Yeah, and just say, do they have anything like minuses to hit or anything like that? Or do you have a way of deploying a unit outside of your deployment zone? Or teleporting? Do you have a teleport? Do you have a setup within 9 away kind of ability? And you will get caught out when you're learning, but that's a learning experience. And I think you won't always know everything. And I think sometimes it's better to play the game and learn from the loss than it is to worry about playing the game perfectly and asking about all the rules and slowing the game down so you get 2 turns in. You're better off playing 5 turns and getting that experience, going away, then reflecting on it, than you are trying to play the perfect game when you're in a position of that. Because
yeah, I'd entirely agree with that. It might be that you need to get to the end of the game, and if your opponents tell you, well, actually, you could have deployed differently, and you're like, whoa, like, knowledge bomb, shit. Yeah.
And I think that when you start Age of Sigmar, and I found the same when I got into War Machine, it's very daunting because there's a lot of War Scrolls. I think there's over 800 War Scrolls. There's a lot of rules. There's all the allegiances. There's all the artifacts and spells, and there's all these like grand formations, whatever they're called, like hosts and all this. you're not going to know it all, and I think that the best way to learn that is to play games. And you might be able to sit down with a book, read it, and memorize it, but there's a lot of stuff to read, and there's a lot of money to buy all the books. So I would say what you're better off doing is getting out there, playing games, learning from experience, and but make sure you make like either. And one thing that I used to do is keep a little journal of my games, so I could write down learning points or things that happened, so I can go must check. Like even if you take photos on your phone, just say, "Can I take a photo?" Take a photo of the board state, of where stuff is.
Take a picture of your deployment. That's
and then look at it back later, and it will just remind you the thought process of that game. And you go, "Why did I do that? I should have done this." And but that's part of the journey. So when you write a list, I think you need to think about environment you're playing in, and that's like whether whatever you're doing. So if you're playing in a tournament, look at the rules pack. What scenarios are in play? Realms in play? What's the meta? Like who's going? If you go into an event, there's an entry list. There's people going. Look on the rankings. What do they play? Oh, well, so and so's been playing Deepkin. Those top players play like Deepkin. You probably have to deal with a Deepkin army. So if you're playing KO, they're a real problem. So do you just accept the fact that you might play Deepkin? It's going to be a tough game and you might lose, or do you try and mitigate it in your army list? And that's a decision to make. And I think the danger is to react too much, and then you go in and don't play Deepkin at all, and you play Zinch 4 times. But I think it's part and parcel. But just accept the fact you're not going to be good against everything. There are going to be tough games, but learn from those games and don't. And my biggest piece of advice is play to win at all times. Never ever go, I've lost this game because they've got X. And I've got
play to minimize a loss. You're not going to achieve anything by that. I've seen this a lot. So even if it's a 1 in 8 chance, and by taking that chance, you leave your army wide open. Let's say it's your opponent's got a teleport unit and they need to fail a charge. If you know you cannot do anything else other than that, then you should take that chance. And if it happens and you lose in like 20 minutes, at least that. But don't play the entirety of the game trying to lose as slowly as possible, because that's definitely 100% not going to give you a single chance of winning. And after you've done that and lost, you can just beat your opponent like, okay, that's over. It took an hour. Like, do you mind if we see what have happened if I tried to give myself a chance and you had failed your charge or whatever? Run through it, have a chat, have a think about it, just chill out, enjoy the break or whatever. But don't play to not lose. They're very, very different from playing to win.
No, and I think when you look at battle tomes as well, or armies, it's good to understand the play style. If you're thinking about collecting an army and you're not sure about it, and you're like, oh, I like the models and that, but I'm not sure about the game inside of it, if that matters to you, then ask a good player who plays it. Just message them, tweet them. I see you play Deepkin a lot, or I see you play this army a lot. What can you tell me? Is it just eels? I mean, is there anyone playing something other than eel lists? And then you go, yeah, there are people, and there are people doing well with it.
Consider
and then
this, I've been trying out this Renegade Shark list. Hit like.
And you might decide that you go, I'm going to play Thralls, and I'm going to try and get the best out of my Thralls. And you say, well, how do I do that? Look at the Deepkin book, look at the formations, look at the soul renders, and go, okay, well, I can get them back, I can heal them. I've got this formation, this house which does this ally thing that buffs them or compensates for a weakness. Then you're already winning than just doing 18 eels with Volturnus, because you're actually thinking about what you're doing. And you might lose more games, but you'll learn more. And I think my advice would be to try and do something different. And there will be people using those units or lists similar, but don't fall into the trap of just leaning into the list that you've seen that looks good. And you might look at a list and go, I really like that. That looks awesome. But try and make it yours. Try and change it. Try and improve on it. Try and don't just copy it. And I think if you play a battle tome that is reliant on one scroll, like Deepkin, I talk about these a lot. Deepkin are a classic example. If that eel scroll got changed or the points got adjusted, that entire battle tome would have fell over. you saw it with KO in the early days in the first book. Some changes happened. The book became not worth really playing, and they disappeared. And some people did play them, very little, and they weren't up around the top anymore. So it was basically clown car or nothing for a lot of KO players. There are people out there who disagree with me, that's fine. But my opinion, it was clown car, there was lots of them, and then there was no clown car because the FAQ changes, the Warscroll changes, then you didn't see KO. So for me, try to find a book that's got a little bit more depth to it. Now, some of the newer books are not rounded. They're just not, because they don't have the depth of scrolls. There are some exceptions. Like you get the original Sylvaneth Battle Tome. It wasn't very deep, but actually it had a lot of play in it. And I think that some of this is an experience, and you might not necessarily know what has got a lot of choice in it. But you could look at a book, and if it's only got 4 Warscrolls in it, it's probably not going to be that flexible.
Yeah.
It might be perfectly fine, and you might be able to play with it, do well with it, but then when stuff adjusts and you want to change it and you want to freshen it up and you want to make it more interesting, you don't have anywhere to go. So you need to make sure that if you really like shooting, definitely pick a battle tome that's got units that shoot, because otherwise
multiple units, not one.
So don't play death.
Don't take like my old Bonesplitterz ETC army where there's only one shooting unit and that's definitely too strong and it's going to change, because then you end up with 60 of these guys with bows and you're like, well, I still want to play Bonesplitterz and I have 5 characters and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's now paint the entire rest of the army. You could take Stormcast or something like that. They've got Judicators, they've got the
Long Strikes, they've got Hurricane Crossbows, they've got Paladors,
loads of stuff.
They've got
a wide open allies pool. Like that's
Ballistas.
A perfect example. Yeah, all the jazz.
Hunters, Vanguard Hunters. I know Jack loves his Vanguard Hunters. But yeah. So I think it's very generic advice, but I'd say play what you love, what you enjoy. Think about the environment you're in. Understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses. Learn from your games. Try and craft the list yourself. Don't copy. If people tell you not to play something or change it, don't change the list until you've played games of it.
Yeah.
Play at least 3 or 4 games. Try and play different things. Then change it based on your experience, not somebody's opinion.
And not your original intention. Like if you take a unit of 9 trolls and you're like, this is my hammer. Like I'm going to plow it into people's face and it is going to F shit up. And then you take it and you plow it into people and it does an average amount of damage. Don't be so married to your original idea for that unit that you can't see that actually it's incredibly resilient. It's not killed anything in any games, but it's not died.
Yeah,
that's a really, really big part of it. When you're analysing these things, you might be like, I love those trolls. I want to go and kill people with them. Maybe they don't get to go and kill people with them, but perhaps they just hold up half your opponent's army for an entire game, like 9 games out of 10, in which case analyze what happened on the table, not what you wanted to happen or your perfect scenario plan for this unit. Be willing to change from your original.
And I think this is about knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So in your head, that example, you went, I want a damaging unit that goes in and messes stuff up. So you immediately looked at trolls because the models have big hammers and look really aggressive. And you think they're really good hammer. Actually, they're an anvil. And by playing, you realise they're an anvil. Then you go, well, actually, what I need then is I need a hammer. So you might go back to your Gloomspite Gitz Battle Tome and look for the hammer in the list. So it's understanding... If you're playing, actually, I need Mangler Squigs because they're my hammer and this is my anvil. But it's understanding that is key. Now, that doesn't mean you can't play with Troggoths. That it just understand what they do and what they're good at, and understand that if you're using them in the wrong place, then that's not how you should be playing with that unit. You know, it's just not going to get the maximising ability of that unit out of the game.
For sure. The other things that I'd say are, if you are struggling with your list that you really want to make work and you're losing games, you don't have to deploy on the 12-inch line. It sounds like such... You do not have to deploy on the 12-inch line. I couldn't say that loud enough. Like, oh, I lost my game. I put my guys there and he came into me and he turned 1, did, like, cool. Deploy, like, a screen on the 12-inch line and then the rest of your army, like, 4 inches back from that and give yourself a chance. If, like, that doesn't apply to every game. Please don't take that as entirely black and white, but... So many times people deploy there just because they can, and it's a really bad idea in a lot of matchups that you could completely change in your favor otherwise, and you can make your boys win the game rather than lose the game. And it happened as the first thing you did before the game even started.
But it's understanding that it's not, there isn't a set plan that works for every game, and that's why I don't like lists that you try to craft that plan before you start the game. You need to understand the impact of your opponent's army. So if you're playing, like you were saying, don't deploy on the 12-inch line. So if I'm like, for me, I got my W and I put my Untamed Beast and they go 9 inches forward, 11 inches forward, actually, it might give them something to springboard off to charge me. Like if they got like more crush or something like that. So actually what I need to think is,
doesn't mean you should.
Actually, although they normally are a screen, what's the screen going to get me in this game? Nothing, because he can't reach me anyway. And he hasn't got any deployment shenanigans. So actually, they're not going to be a screen. They're going to sit behind my army, and they're just going to hold my home objectives. So understand the different role that they can play, and I think that comes down to experience. And if you know that your effective opponent's charge range with their move and all their bonuses is 21 inches, if you're 22 inches away, they can't charge you. So you're never going to be caught out, you rolled an 11-inch charge. But you gave him the opportunity to roll 11, and I won an ETC game because I played the Swedish guy Elizabeth. It's going back edition, but principle still applies. Gave me an 11-inch charge on his Slans unit with my Skull Crushers, thinking I'd never roll the dice. And I just went, well, I might as well. I'm not going to lose anything. If I fail it, I move forward a little bit in the old game, but basically it didn't make any difference. And I rolled it and I popped a 6. And he was like, that was lucky. And I said, well, you gave me the chance. It might be a 1 in 36 chance, but if it's out of 12 inches, it's a 0 chance. So
yeah,
your fault, really. I mean, and that's again, is understanding that this is Warhammer is risk management and redundancy and mitigation, and it's all about risk management. It is really all about that. It's like playing poker. And positional play is really important, and I think that's why if you're good at positional play, you'll be good at Age of Sigmar, because it's all about, is that guy within 3 of the front, and did you charge and leave that guy out of combat so he couldn't pile in that effective unit? Have I deployed in a way that I can't be pinned by one charge that's going to hit 3 of my units? I've spread my men out in a checkerboard, so whatever he charges, I've got the freedom to go where I want. And all this stuff is just experience. And I'd say that, but when you write a list, is try and think about synergies in your list. Try and think about scenarios like, have you got enough bodies? Have you got enough wounds? Have you got a monster? Have you got a hero? You know, because some missions you need those. What do your battle line units do? Are you gonna, if you play Scorched Earth, are you just gonna be done because you need Scorched Earth to burn them? It's a better part of Valor. It's one of them. But one of the new missions, you need battle line units to burn the objectives. So if your battle line units is 3 units of 5 direwolves, probably not happening. So
yep.
I think it's all those things, and you'll write a list, and you'll never get a list that does everything. No. There might be an odd exception, but generally, it won't do everything really well. And I think it's just understand that you will have weaknesses, you will have strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you come in against a bad matchup, as well as the 12-inch line thing, you don't need to kill your opponent's army to win the game. So if you go in there and you realise that your paper has come up against their scissors and your army is effed, then you can still go and stand in the right place, sacrifice things to the best of your ability, block people off, and you could win a game without killing a single model if your objective is to win the game, not to kill your opponent's army. So they're the 2 ways to get the most out of your army in bad situations, generically, in Age of Sigmar, I'd say. And then you get to learn something from those games rather than just, be sad.
Yeah, I think that'll basically do, but I'd say seek out the challenge, find good players as well, listen to advice, but take it as advice, and experience there's no substitute for it, and take everything with a pinch of salt. We've just gave you loads of advice now, so you don't know what you're talking about. No, but the point is that don't write anything off. Try out different combinations. Read the war scrolls you don't see. What do they do? Does that synergize with this thing? And once you get enough experience with a book, delving into something like Brayherd is really interesting, because nobody's really doing it. So you're going to be the only one exploring it. And then you might even get a reputation for being the best Brayherd player, and that could be your objective. And that's fun, that's good, and that's a nice accolade to have. And you might end up being, oh, that guy's always around the bottom of Brayherd, what's he doing? Why is that guy running Rogue Idols? What an idiot. But you run it because you want to play those models, that army, and the enjoyment and the learning is where it comes from. So I think I've been sort of full and foul of this in the past, where you want to play an army but you don't because you think, oh, it's not that good and I'm going to lose games and it's going to be annoying, it's going to suck. But actually, I'd rather win a game with an underpowered army than win a game with a meta list.
And you didn't know because you didn't try it, so you definitely didn't give it a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you never know.
Sure.
You might find something that's a bit of a gem, like you did with your order list, and become the first GT champion. So
absolutely.
If
you guys have got any list you'd like us to try and make work, you're like, I really want to make chimeras and beasts of chaos work, or whatever it is, however weird or wacky, pop it below. We will accept the challenge and we will do our absolute best to write something. Let us know, like, I like aggressive armies, I want to use this unit, and I want to be able to kill stuff first turn, whatever your objectives are, or I just like these models, what do I do? Pop it below and we will take the challenge and we will smash it.
And we've got a Discord community, join that. And there's groups of like different channels for order, death, destruction. Put your list in there, ask us questions. We do check it. I check it every day. So if you want to have any advice, let us know. And like I say, just comment below if there's anything you really want us to record a video on, and we'll think about that. But thanks for listening and watching, if you're watching this on YouTube. So appreciate that. It's been a bit of a long one, but hopefully it's been an interesting journey to get an insight into how we go about writing army lists, our thought process, and give you some advice on how to go ahead and write an effective Age of Sigmar match playlist for your games. So thanks very much. If you like it, subscribe, all that stuff the algorithm dictates that we've got to tell you to do. But if you've stayed this long, then we like you, so you like us. That's how it works. So
amazing. Thanks very much, guys.
All right, thanks.
Bye.